A world on the edge. The shimmering spires of Neo-Alexandria clawed at the cerulean sky, monuments to human ingenuity. Autonomous vehicles, sleek and silent, weaved intricate patterns through the skyways, their navigation systems a ballet of light and precision. Below, in the vibrant marketplace, holographic advertisements flickered, promising everything from instant enlightenment to genetically enhanced pets. But even from this distance, flaws marred the perfection. Litter, swept into grimy eddies by the artificial wind, clogged the corners of the plazas. A hushed argument, laced with desperation, echoed from a shadowed alleyway, a stark reminder of the inequalities festering beneath the polished surface. High above, beyond the breathable atmosphere, a HFY observation vessel held steady. Within its sterile, geometrically precise interior, multiple eyes observed, catalogued, and judged. Their technological prowess is undeniable. Counselor Thraxfor rumbled, his voice a low, guttural vibration. But their social fabric, it is unraveling. Indeed, High Counselor Zorgan 7 responded, his voice a chillingly smooth monotone. He stood at the apex of the chamber, his multifaceted eyes glinting with cold calculation. They squabble over resources they could easily synthesize. They cling to outdated ideologies that only serve to divide them. They are inefficient. The council chamber, a vast, resonating space constructed from polished obsidian, hummed with the collective mental energy of the HFY counselors. Their bodies, insected and imposing, were arranged in a perfect circle around Zorgan 7. Each counselor represented a different aspect of HFY society, science, military strategy, resource management, and ethics, though the last was, arguably, the least influential. We have observed their history for centuries. Counselor Lyra 9, the designated ethicist, spoke with a hesitant tremor in her voice. They are capable of great compassion, great creativity. Is there not a path to guide them, to nurture their potential? Zorgan 7 turned, his gaze piercing. Nurture? They are a species riddled with self-destructive tendencies. Their history is a testament to their barbarity. They poison their own water, pollute their own air. They wage wars over meaningless territories. Such irrationality cannot be allowed to spread. A low murmur rippled through the chamber. Even amongst the HFY, known for their pragmatic ruthlessness, the weight of the decision hung heavy. The collective has analyzed their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities. Zorgan 7 continued, projecting a holographic image of Neo-Alexandria onto the chamber's central platform. The image zoomed in, highlighting the city's decay, the desperate faces in the crowds, the subtle signs of societal collapse. Their very dependence on technology is their Achilles heel. He paused, letting the implication sink in. I propose a solution. Purification. The image shifted, replaced by complex schematics and algorithms. Project Purity. A carefully calibrated alteration of their water supply. A compound that will inhibit the more volatile aspects of their emotional response, reduce aggression, instill cooperation, subdue rebellion. Lyra 9 gasped, her antennae twitching in agitation. You propose to lobotomize an entire species, to strip them of their free will? Free will is a luxury they cannot afford. Zorgan 7 countered, his voice unwavering. Order is paramount. Efficiency is essential. We offer them a chance to become productive members of the galactic community. Under our guidance, of course. He swept his gaze across the council. Those who vote against Project Purity, speak now. Silence. The only sound was the low hum of the observation vessel, a constant reminder of the cold, uncaring void that lay beyond. Fear, perhaps, or maybe resignation, held the other counselors captive. Lyra 9 opened her mandibles to protest, then closed them. The weight of HFY societal conditioning, the inherent belief in their own superiority, was too heavy to bear. Very well, Zorgan 7 said, his voice echoing through the chamber. Project Purity is approved. Let the transformation begin. The subtle shift. The city hummed, but a different tune than Eris was used to. The usual cacophony of horns, shouting vendors, and impassioned arguments seemed muted. He noticed it first at the market, a vendor accepting a ridiculously low offer for his prized mangoes without so much as a grimace. Then, on the subway, a young woman surrendered her seat to a burly man who hadn't even asked, offering a placid smile. Eris scowled, adjusting his glasses. Coincidence, probably. The human brain was wired to find patterns, even where none existed. Still, the feeling lingered, a discordant note in the symphony of urban life. He brushed it aside, his mind already wrestling with the latest batch of water samples. Back in his cramped lab, the air thick with the metallic tang of chemicals, Eris meticulously pipetted solutions into test tubes. He'd been chasing a ghost for weeks, an anomaly in the city's water supply that his instruments stubbornly refused to identify. He muttered to himself, a habit his ex-wife had found endlessly irritating. Come on, you microscopic bastard, show yourself! The television in the corner flickered to life, a news anchor's bland face filling the screen. Reports continue to surface regarding a noticeable decrease in workplace disputes and a general increase in public cooperation. Experts are baffled by what some are calling a period of unprecedented civic harmony. Eris snorted. Civic harmony? More like civic lobotomy. He turned up the volume, a niggling unease prickling at the back of his neck. Psychologists speculate that the phenomenon might be linked to seasonal affective disorder, triggered by the unusually overcast weather. The anchor droned on, oblivious to the implications. Eris switched off the TV with a frustrated sigh. Seasonal affective disorder? That explained the lack of sunshine, not the vacant smiles and unnerving compliance he'd witnessed. He refocused on his work, running the samples through the mass spectrometer again. The data scrolled across the screen, a chaotic jumble of peaks and valleys. Then, he saw a faint, almost imperceptible blip on the graph, a spectral echo amidst the noise. He zoomed in, his heart pounding. It was there, consistent across all the samples, a trace element unlike anything he'd ever encountered. He ran a database search. Nothing. He tweaked the parameters, broadened the search, still nothing. Damn it! He slammed his fist on the table, rattling the beakers. He grabbed a lukewarm cup of coffee, the bitter liquid doing little to soothe his frayed nerves. The subtle shift in the city, the baffling apathy, the unidentifiable element in the water. It was all connected. He just couldn't prove it. He felt like he was standing on the edge of a precipice, staring into an abyss that no one else could see. The Chiral.it had to be them. Project Purity. He shuddered. What was it doing to people? How far would they go? He picked up his phone, his fingers hovering over the speed dial for Dr. Chin, his former colleague. He hesitated. Chin was already skeptical of his theories about the KRYL. This would sound like raving lunacy. But he had to tell someone. He had to warn them. Unseen hands. Dr. Thorne's plea for emergency research funds was met with a veneer of polite skepticism. The public health official, his grin plastered on like a cheap mask, pushed a tepid cup of coffee and a grant proposal guide across the desk. Thorne, gripping the pamphlet as if it were a contaminated sample, felt a drumbeat in his skull. He reiterated the anomalies, the statistical impossibilities, the disquieting link between the water purification process and the strange neurological disturbances cropping up in his patients. Doctor, the man said, his smile unwavering as a statue's, we value your dedication, but the municipal water undergoes rigorous scrutiny. Project Purity is a resounding success story. Thorne strangled the urge to dissect that particular definition of success. Scrutiny by whom, exactly? And what of these repercussions? They cannot be ignored. He slapped a printout detailing his patient's conditions onto the gleaming surface, jarring a picture of the official's handshake with Mayor Reed. The smile flickered, just for a heartbeat. Your concerns are noted, Doctor. Now. He gestured towards the pamphlet, dismissing Thorne with a curt wave. A simmering rage bubbled in Thorne's chest as he exited. He mumbled equations, his fingers drumming against his thigh. He required more information, further specimens, additional funds. He needed unassailable evidence before the situation metastasized beyond control. Elsewhere, in the city's shadowed underbelly, Jax Ramirez was hunched over her laptop, the screen's glow reflecting in her intent eyes. The staccato rhythm of her keystrokes punctuated the silence. She navigated digital firewalls, decrypted complex codes, and picked her way through the city's digital arteries with practiced ease. She hunted for a trace, an echo, anything connecting to Project Purity, She unearthed it, buried within a restricted file, a cryptic line in a project summary. Potential for unforeseen alterations in cognitive function, remediation protocols in development. Jax copied the file to a heavily encrypted drive, a cold sense of satisfaction settling within her. She didn't fully grasp the meaning of cognitive alterations, but instinct screamed that it spelled trouble. Time to dig deeper. Armed with Jax's information, Thorne secured an audience with Mayor Reed. Her office, a world apart from the sterile health department, boasted plush carpets and sweeping urban vistas. Reed greeted him with a manufactured cordiality that failed to reach her gaze. "Dr. Thorne," she said, gesturing to a seat. "I understand you harbor reservations regarding Project Purity." Thorne plunged into his explanation, citing the data, the statistical discrepancies, the cerebral effects. He spoke with escalating fervor, his words tumbling over each other, desperate to convey the gravity of the situation. Reed listened with an inscrutable expression. When he concluded, breathless, she leaned in, her voice a low, deliberate current. "Doctor, I appreciate your passion, but I must assure you, Project Purity is both safe and essential. It is paramount for our city's future." She paused, her eyes hardening to chips of flint. "Your findings, if made public, could incite widespread hysteria. A crisis we simply cannot weather." "But what if I'm accurate? What if this is harming our citizens?" Thorne implored, his voice rising in desperation. Reed rose, signaling the meeting's end. "Doctor, I empathize with your anxiety. However, I place my confidence in our experts, in the empirical evidence, and above all, in Project Purity." A fleeting, obligatory smile touched her lips. "Thank you for your time." As Thorne departed, the city lights seemed to mock his solitude. Isolated and powerless, he felt like an anomaly fighting against invisible forces holding the metropolis hostage. He knew, with icy certainty, that his time was rapidly dwindling. The poison's purpose. "It's remarkable," Thorne mumbled, eyes glued to the spectral lines dancing across the mass spectrometer screen. "A cyclic peptide, but unlike anything I've ever encountered, the resonance frequencies, off the charts." He adjusted his glasses, pushing them further up his nose. "Jax, are you getting a clean read on the chirality?" Jax leaned over his shoulder, her brow furrowed. "Trying, but the signal's noisy. Someone's been monkeying with the filters, Thorne, again." She tapped a few commands on her console. "Look at this, the baseline calibration was deliberately skewed. That's not accidental drift." Thorne swore under his breath, a string of scientific jargon laced with colorful expletives. "Sabotage. They know we're onto them. But why go to such lengths? What is this stuff even for?" He gestured to the complex molecular diagram now displayed on the central monitor. "It's not lethal, at least not in any concentration we've tried. It's subtle, like a key, but opening what?" "Maybe not lethal," Jax said slowly, "but persistent. We found traces of it in the water supply weeks ago, and it's still there, building up." She pulled up a series of comparative graphs. The KRYLL weren't just poisoning the well, they were seeding it. Thorne ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. "Seeding, like a catalyst, something that doesn't kill, but changes things." He began pacing, muttering to himself. "Influence, manipulation, neural pathways, cognitive function? Are they trying to dumb us down, make us more docile?" Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, plunging the lab into near darkness. Emergency lights kicked in, casting long, distorted shadows. "What the hell?" Jax exclaimed, reaching for the emergency power override. A section of the ceiling panel above Thorne gave way with a loud crash. A heavy metal instrument panel, dislodged from its moorings, plummeted towards his head. "Thorne, look out!" Jax yelled, diving forward. She managed to shove him out of the way just as the panel slammed into the floor where he had been standing, the impact sending vibrations through the lab. Dust filled the air. Thorne, shaken but unharmed, stared at the mangled metal. "Well, that was direct," he said, his voice tight. Jax was already on her feet, scanning the compromised ceiling with her tactical flashlight. "Someone cut the support cables. Clean cuts, laser precision." She moved quickly to the lab's security console. Cameras are down. Surprise, surprise. This wasn't some random accident, was it? Thorne stated, unnecessarily. They want you dead, Thorne, not docile, dead. Jax pulled a sidearm from her belt, a sleek black pulse pistol. We need to get you out of here, now. Wait, Thorne said, his eyes widening. The data, they'll wipe everything. He rushed back to his workstation, frantically trying to download his analysis. Forget the data for now, we're sitting ducks here. Jax grabbed his arm, pulling him towards the emergency exit. We can recover it later, your life comes first, you stubborn egghead. As they ran through the darkened corridors, Thorne's mind raced. They weren't just trying to silence him, they were actively targeting him. That meant they were close. Very close. And the poison, whatever its purpose, was far more important than he had initially imagined. The KRYLO were desperate to keep its secret hidden, driven by loss. Damn it! Eris slammed his fist on the holographic display, the projected schematics of the KRYLO bioweapon flickering. Another dead end. Jax, perched on a stool amidst a chaotic landscape of wires and discarded energy bar wrappers, didn't flinch. Language, Thorne, and maybe try taking a break. You look like you haven't slept in days. He ignored her, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. It's the enzyme sequence. It's wrong. Too simple. It shouldn't be able to trigger that level of cellular degradation. Jax sighed, hopping off the stool. Maybe it's supposed to be simple. Occam's razor, Doc. Eris whirled around, his eyes gleaming with an intensity that bordered on manic. No, they're not stupid, Jax. They're KRYLL. This is a deception. A distraction. He began pacing, muttering to himself. They want us to chase this enzyme while the real vector is. He trailed off, lost in thought. Jax watched him, a knot of concern tightening in her stomach. This wasn't just about stopping the KRYLL anymore. It was personal. Thorne, she said softly. What's really going on? He stopped pacing, his back to her. The lab, usually buzzing with the hum of equipment, was suddenly silent. After a long moment he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. My sister, Elara. She was 15. Perfectly healthy one day, gone the next. He turned, and for the first time, Jax saw a vulnerability in his eyes that she hadn't thought possible. It started with a fever, then muscle weakness. The doctors were baffled. They ran every test imaginable. Nothing. She just withered away. Her cells, they were breaking down at an accelerated rate, just like the water poisoning victims. A memory flashed in his mind. Elara, laughing, her long brown hair catching the sunlight as she chased butterflies in their garden. Then, the sterile white walls of the hospital room, the rhythmic beeping of the monitors, the hollow, haunted look in her eyes as he held her hand, her skin papery thin. They said it was a genetic anomaly. A fluke, but I never believed them. Even then, something felt wrong. I started researching cellular degradation, looking for any explanation. I dove into xenobiology, fringe science, anything that might give me an answer. His voice cracked. And then, I found the KRYLL. The first reports of their biological warfare tactics, their ability to manipulate cellular structures on a subatomic level. It all clicked. Jax stepped closer, her voice filled with empathy. You think the KRYLL? I don't think, Jax. I know. They were experimenting, testing their weapons. Elara was collateral damage. The words were laced with a venomous rage. And now, they're doing it again. On a global scale. He walked back to the holographic display, his fingers flying across the controls. That's why this enzyme sequence is too simple. It's a misdirection. They're using something else, something more subtle, something that targets specific genetic markers, something like what they used on Elara. He spun around, his eyes blazing. We have to find it, Jax. We have to expose them, for Elara. For everyone. The lab sprang back to life with renewed intensity. Jax, fueled by a mixture of sympathy and righteous anger, began running complex algorithms, searching for patterns in the victim's genetic data. Eris, driven by his personal demons, worked tirelessly, his brilliance shining through the chaos. The hours blurred into a relentless cycle of analysis, hypothesis, and testing, Sleep was a luxury they couldn't afford. The KRYLO were playing a deadly game, and Thorne and his team were determined to win. Even if it cost them everything. The accidental antidote. Eris Thorne hadn't slept in 36 hours. Empty coffee cups littered his workstation, each a testament to a failed hypothesis. Jax watched him from across the lab, her own exhaustion a dull ache behind her eyes. But she forced herself to focus. Eris was close, she could feel it in the frantic energy radiating from him. He muttered to himself, scribbling equations on the holographic display, erasing them just as quickly. The binding affinity. It's too selective. It should be shutting down systems faster, inducing complete cellular collapse within minutes. He paused, eyes narrowed, staring at the complex molecular structure of the KRYLO compound projected in the air. He reached out, rotating the model, his fingers tracing the intricate bonds. Selective, he repeated louder this time. But why? Suddenly, his eyes widened. He spun around, nearly knocking over a precarious stack of research papers. Jax, run a comparative analysis. Human liver enzymes, specifically focusing on CYP450 subtypes. Cross-reference that with the KRYLO compound's breakdown pathway. Jax, startled by his outburst, didn't hesitate. She knew better than to question Eris in these moments. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, initiating the simulation. The lab hummed with the whir of processing power. The results appeared on the screen, a cascade of data that would overwhelm anyone but Jax. But she was adept at parsing information, seeing patterns emerge from the chaos. Her breath caught in her throat. Eris, she said, her voice barely a whisper. They targeted pathways already in overdrive. Eris rushed to her side, his eyes scanning the screen. Cytochrome P450. The primary enzyme system for metabolizing xenobiotics. Foreign substances. Poisons. He laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. They thought they were delivering a death blow, but they were just overloading a system already accustomed to handling toxic loads. He paced, his mind racing. It's the caffeine, the alcohol, the nicotine. The endless stream of processed food additives. We've been unwittingly pre-treating ourselves for years. So, Jax said, our bad habits are what's saving us. Exactly. Eris exclaimed, grabbing a marker and scribbling furiously on a whiteboard already covered in diagrams. They underestimated humanity's baseline toxicity. Our livers are battle-hardened veterans, not naive recruits. He spun back towards Jax, his eyes shining with manic energy. We need to exploit this. Amplify it. Find a compound that further upregulates these enzymes, a superinducer, something that will break down the KRYLO toxin even faster. Jax leaned back, considering. Okay, but how widespread is this poisonous lifestyle you're talking about? Is it enough to make a difference on a global scale? That's where you come in, Jax, Eris said, a gleam in his eye. I need data. Global consumption rates for caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, processed foods, everything. Show me how many people are actively poisoning themselves, and how much they're consuming. Jax nodded, already pulling up databases. Alright, let's see just how much self-destructive behavior we can weaponize. She smirked, a spark of grim determination in her eyes. This accidental antidote might just be humanity's saving grace. Fighting fire with fire. Citric acid, malic acid, a touch of ascorbic. Thorne muttered, scribbling furiously on the whiteboard that dominated his cramped lab. Empty coffee cups formed a precarious tower beside him. He hadn't slept in what felt like days, fueled by caffeine and a desperate hope. The KRYLO were arrogant. They targeted the water, assuming our biology was fragile. Idiots. Jax leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. Fragile is relative, Thorne. Most of us can't handle what you call breakfast. She gestured to a beaker of suspiciously green liquid bubbling on a hot plate. Thorne waved a dismissive hand. Minor detail. The point is, they underestimated our resilience. Our bodies are already primed for a certain level of stimulation. We simply need to amplify it. He tapped the whiteboard with a marker, circling a chemical formula. This a simple, easily synthesized compound. Harmless in small doses. Unpleasant in larger ones. and utterly disruptive to the KRYLL's plan. Disruptive how? Jax asked, pushing off the doorframe. Their influence relies on a specific physiological response. This compound will scramble that response. Like static on a radio. It won't cure anyone, not exactly, but it will sever the connection, sever it wide. Thorne's eyes gleamed with manic energy. It's fighting fire with fire, Jax. We're weaponizing our own tolerance. And you can mass produce this, static? Relatively easily. The ingredients are common, found in every supermarket. The synthesis is straightforward. He hesitated. Well, straightforward for me. We'll need to introduce it into the water supply. Subtly, efficiently. Jax grinned, a flash of teeth in the dim light. That's where I come in. I know a guy who knows a guy who used to work at the city's water treatment plant. Old codes never die, Thorne. They just get recycled. Meanwhile, in the KRYL command center, a sterile, obsidian chamber pulsating with faint blue light, High Counselor Zorgon 7 observed the final calibrations with cold satisfaction. The broadcast is ready. A drone-like technician announced, its voice devoid of inflection. Excellent. Zorgon 7 rasped, his multifaceted eyes gleaming. The final phase of Project Purity is at hand. The humans will be guided, their chaotic impulses quelled, their potential unlocked. He ran a three-fingered hand over a pulsating console. They resist now, like insects caught in a web, but soon they will understand. They will embrace the order, the tranquility of unified purpose. He paused, detecting a flicker of unease within the hive mind. There have been anomalies, the technician continued, his voice slightly less monotone. Sporadic instances of resistance exceeding predicted parameters. Isolated cases of cognitive dissonance. Zorgon 7's mandibles clicked in annoyance. Minor deviations, insignificant. The collective will is too strong. Prepare for broadcast. Let the awakening begin. He watched as the countdown timer on the main screen ticked inexorably towards zero, unaware of the wrench Jax was about to throw into his perfectly orchestrated machine. Hours later, cloaked in shadows and smelling faintly of chlorine, Jax slipped through the back entrance of the water treatment plant. The air hummed with the low thrum of machinery. Her heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silent metallic backdrop. In her backpack, nestled amongst tools and lockpicks, were several unassuming containers filled with thorns. Static. She had a feeling she was about to turn the volume way up, the rebellion of vice. The KRYL's declarations reverberated across every screen, every comm unit, every bioimplant. From Xylo's central control spire, Zorgon 7, his compound eyes gleaming with predatory anticipation, monitored the broadcast. His visage dominated the primary display, his voice resonating with the synthesized weight of the KRYL consensus. Humans, your epoch of defiance concludes now. Project Purity will. He was cut short. A jarring, mirthless cackle fractured the transmission, obliterating his carefully crafted pronouncements. The image jittered, replaced by a shaky, citizen-shot recording from Neo-Tokyo's grimy streets. A human, face daubed with what appeared to be vibrant, artificial goo, taunted a KRYL patrol bot, its tongue waggling disrespectfully. Zorgon 7's mandibles clicked in irritation. A trivial disturbance. Easily quashed. He ordered the channel scrubbed. Another intrusion followed, this one originating from the skeletal remains of old London. A band of humans had erected a makeshift stage, plastered with graffiti and salvage tech. A shorn-headed woman wielding a guitar that spat electric fire was unleashing a cacophony of sound, a pulsing rhythm that infected the crowd with manic energy. Limbs flailed, bodies swayed, a whirlwind of joyous abandon. What is the meaning of this insolence? Zorgon 7 rasped, his chitinous armor prickling with rising anger. Reports poured in, each more outlandish than the last. Across the scorched plains of the American wastelands, humans staged impromptu demolition derbies using cannibalized KRYL transports. In Luna's hydroponic gardens, they pelted surveillance drones with genetically altered vegetables. Even within the confines of the rigidly controlled underground cities, murmurs of rebellion slithered through the ventilation shafts. The antidote. It was taking effect. But not as predicted. The expectation was for placid acquiescence, a soothing of anxieties, a stifling of insurrection. Instead, it had kindled something visceral. Zorgan 7 fixed his gaze on a feed from a human hospital. A medic, his face flushed and eyes alight with feverish exhilaration, was injecting himself with a colossal dose of the antidote. He then launched into a clumsy juggling act with gleaming surgical steel, all while crooning a KRYL military anthem in a grating voice. The KRYL control network, meticulously woven over decades, began to unravel. Surveillance systems choked on ludicrous data, images of humans decked out in preposterous finery, recordings of elaborate practical jokes. Streams of consciousness saturated with wild imaginings. Logic bombs, ingeniously concealed as memes and viral videos, burrowed through encrypted channels, intent on crippling the KRYL operating systems. These humans weren't battling. They were reveling. They were transforming the tools of oppression into playthings, the implements of control into instruments of bedlam. Zorgan 7 watched, his multifaceted eyes widening in dawning horror. The painstakingly erected edifice of KRYL authority was collapsing. Not beneath the force of organized warfare, but under the sheer, unadulterated weight of human glee. The dispatches continued to arrive. Factories were morphing into throbbing rave dens. Agricultural complexes had been repurposed as colossal canvases for sprawling, hallucinogenic murals. Even the KRYL garrison troops were being targeted, not with weaponry, but with intricately designed, harmless pranks. One patrol awoke to find their transport vehicle overflowing with rubber poultry. Another was serenaded by a barbershop quartet delivering a KRYL love song. Zorgan 7 slammed a fist against the console, cracking his carapace. Augment the dosage! Deploy the suppressors! Reclaim order! But his commands went unheeded. The KRYL communication grid was faltering, submerged in a deluge of human ridiculousness. The collective mind was overloaded, incapable of processing the sheer volume of pandemonium. He could only observe, helpless, as the screen before him showcased a human face, grinning madly, brandishing a sign that declared, "Party at Zorgan's! BYOB, bring your own brains!" The peals of laughter echoed within his compound eyes, a discordant symphony of defiance. Project Purity had detonated in their faces, spectacularly. Poison and paradox. Dr. Thorne stared at the shimmering image of Zorgan 7, the KRYL High Counselor's face an impassive mask of crystalline structure. "You misunderstand," Thorne rasped, his voice hoarse from days without sleep and fueled by lukewarm coffee. "Project Purity, it failed because of us, not in spite of us." Zorgan 7's multifaceted eyes refracted the light of a distant, unseen star. "Explain. Your species is demonstrably flawed, riddled with self-destructive tendencies." Thorne chuckled, a dry, brittle sound that echoed in the makeshift command center. "Precisely. You sought to purify our water supply, to remove the imperfections, the contaminants. But you see, Counselor, we didn't need your assistance. We were already doing a bang-up job ourselves." He gestured wildly, nearly knocking over a stack of empty pizza boxes. "The nicotine in our blood, the alcohol in our livers, the microplastics in our tissues, these are the very things that repelled your nanites." Confusion flickered across Zorgan 7's alien features. "Impossible. Our calculations were precise. The biocompatibility matrix was based on a flawed premise. You assumed a baseline of purity that hasn't existed on this planet for centuries. We're a species marinating in our own filth, Counselor. A walking, talking, breathing cocktail of toxins. Your purification process was like trying to clean a sewer with distilled water. It just didn't take." Thorne leaned closer to the comms panel, a manic glint in his eyes. "Congratulations, Counselor. You were defeated by our vices." A long silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the hum of the equipment. Then, a new voice, sharp and laced with urgency, cut through the static. "Zorgan 7, command reports multiple vessels retracting. Project Purity showing complete destabilization across the target planet. Awaiting your orders." Zorgan 7's gaze hardened. "Initiate emergency withdrawal. This planet is anomalous. We will analyze the data and reevaluate our strategies." The image flickered and died. Outside, A cheer erupted, spreading like wildfire through the city. People poured into the streets, their faces illuminated by the flashing lights of emergency vehicles and the glow of bonfires. The air filled with the aroma of cheap beer and the acrid scent of burning tires. Someone even managed to get a massive inflatable cigarette erected in the middle of Times Square. Mayor Reed, looking both relieved and utterly bewildered, stood on a makeshift stage in front of City Hall. I don't pretend to understand what just happened, she admitted, her voice amplified by a hastily rigged sound system. But the KRYLO are gone, for now, and apparently we have our collective bad habits to thank for it. A nervous laugh rippled through the crowd. So, enjoy yourselves. But please try not to burn the city down. We have a lot of cleaning up to do, literally and figuratively. As the city erupted in a cacophony of celebration, Thorne found himself alone in the quiet of the command center. He watched the retreating KRYL ships on the monitor, a knot of unease twisting in his stomach. They were gone, yes, but the victory felt hollow. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that this wasn't the end. The KRYL were nothing if not persistent, and humanity, in its blissful ignorance, was celebrating a reprieve, not a resolution. The poison that saved them, he suspected, would eventually be their undoing. The question was, how long did they have, and what could they do to prepare for the inevitable return? He reached for another cup of coffee, adding an extra packet of sugar, a small act of defiance against the looming uncertainty. The beverage was more chemical sludge than actual coffee, and he drank it anyway. After all, it was their poisons that had won the day.